Okay, well, that pretty much wraps us up with the circulating hormones, which we learned are one of the two types of hormones, the other being local hormones. Remember, circulating hormones circulate by way of our blood to, in many cases, distant, far away target organs and target cells, whereas local hormones act on a neighbor in the case of paracrine, or on themselves in the case of autocrine. And won't get into specifics as to whether these are paracrine or autocrine, but I do want to talk about some of the important local hormones in our body, and I'll do that right now. So, reading through, two families of eicosanoid molecules are found in virtually all body cells except for red blood cells, RBCs, where they act as local hormones, both paracrine and autocrine. This includes prostaglandins, which, as you can see, do a lot of things: alter smooth muscle contraction, glandular secretions, blood flow, reproductive processes, platelet function, respiration, nerve impulse transmission, lipid metabolism, immune responses, as well as roles in inflammation, fever, and intensifying pain. So really, we won't talk a lot about those, but in times where we especially mention the immune system, inflammation, fever, platelets, that kind of stuff, we will mention them a little bit, but not a whole lot. Leukotrienes play a role in stimulating what's called chemotaxis of our white blood cells, which is an important attraction of white blood cells to areas of infection. That's how our white blood cells know to go where bacteria are. We'll get into that when we get to the immune system. And leukotrienes also play and help mediate inflammation. Now imagine everybody's heard of aspirin, which is described as a pain and inflammation reliever. It blocks the synthesis of prostaglandins that are involved in pain mechanisms, and it also blocks the prostaglandins involved in blood clotting. You may have heard that aspirin is a blood thinner, which really is kind of misleading in that blood thinner kind of makes it sound like it's a watery blood situation. A blood thinner just means that the blood is less likely to clot. Aspirin is a blood thinner because it blocks those prostaglandins that promote blood clotting, and so that's why it's a blood thinner. Okay, growth hormones and growth factors. Several of the hormones described, which includes growth hormone, the thyroid hormones T3 and T4, as well as insulin, stimulate cell growth and division. Several more recently discovered hormones called growth factors play important roles in tissue development, growth, and repair. And as you can see, they are listed here in table 18.2 or 18.12, which you're not going to need to study or anything like that. The main thing that I want you to know is what these growth factors do, and that's that they promote mitosis. That's why we call them mitogenic. Genic for genesis means to promote or form or create. Mito for mitosis. Mitosis, as you guys hopefully remember, is a fancy word for cell division. Okay? And if cells divide, things grow. So that's how growth factors cause growth. They promote cell division. All right, the very last thing I want to talk about is stress, something that we all deal with. And unfortunately, people seem to get confused when it comes to stress, always assuming that stress is bad. Well, not all stress is bad. It is a part of everything that we do. And as college students, you are very, very exposed to both positive forms of stress and negative forms of stress. It's completely impossible to remove all stress from our everyday lives. If we didn't have stress, we would not be doing anything with ourselves. Eustress is a powerful, helpful form of stress that helps us meet certain challenges And I say it's powerful because this is, as I always say, like the drive to do stuff with your life, which you guys are all, doing right now, taking this class, taking other classes, trying to earn a degree. It is the drive to be, a successful working adult. It's also part of, wanting to be a better athlete and stuff like that for all of you that are softball and baseball players and that kind of stuff. Distress is what we would think of typically when we use the word stress is that's harmful for the body. Okay, so eustress is positive, distress is negative. Okay, now unfortunately, eustress can unfortunately become distress if we don't um, take care of ourselves and take care of the situations that we're in correctly. Any stimulus that produces a stress response is called a stressor. And so it's not just like, the feeling that you have so many things to do, an exam to study for, or anything like that. Sure, those can be stressors, but so can just any disturbance to the human body, things like exposure to extreme heat, extreme cold, changes in environment like going to high altitude, poisons, toxins from bacteria, heavy bleeding, or strong emotional reactions, obviously as well. So just anything that disturbs homeostasis, essentially. Now, when we say that stressor is something that produces a stress response, this is what we're talking about. A three-step or three-stage response that our body does to try to counteract that stressor to promote homeostasis. It's called the stress response, also known as the General Adaptation Syndrome, GAS. And much of it's controlled by our hypothalamus. And as I said, it involves three stages. The first stage we have a hopefully great appreciation and understanding of. That's the very first immediate reaction our body has, called the fight or flight response, involving nerve impulses from the hypothalamus, triggering the sympathetic nervous system, resulting in release of epinephrine, norepinephrine, doing things to, allow us to either fight or flight, whatever that is, that's, affecting our body, okay? Whether that's running from a bear or whatever it is. We've talked all about this, all the different things that go into it. Increasing glucose, oxygen to the brain, skeletal muscles, and heart, at the same time inhibiting digestive, urinary, and reproductive activities. As a result of this, though, a reduction of blood flow to our kidneys will trigger the release of renin, which activates that renin-angiotensin-aldosterone mechanism, ultimately leading to water retention, causing elevations in blood pressure. Now, the fight or flight response is a very short-term stage. It is not a long-term thing. The second stage, which is much longer, much, for days it can last, is called the resistance reaction. Okay, it still involves the hypothalamus, but instead of activating the sympathetic nervous system, we release hormones that trigger the anterior pituitary to release hormones, which then trigger the release of other hormones. Okay, once again, demonstrating that step-by-step process with many organs. Ultimately, the hormones that are released that help with the resistance reaction will be cortisol, which we just mentioned, or I just mentioned, is our stress hormone, the thyroid hormones, T3 and T4, and growth hormone. And that's because these all play a role in regulating metabolism. In other words, they help increase our ATP production. And as we know, ATP allows us to keep energy for resistance. Okay. Now, at this point, we have one of two end goals or one of two end games. And results is either going to be resolution, whether that stress is, satisfied and, we've combated it and it's over with, then we recover. Or we reach exhaustion. And this is a stage we do not want to experience, but this is when our body eventually runs out of resources so that we cannot continue the resistance stage. This is also the point in time where that prolonged exposure to cortisol can be detrimental to our health, causing things like wasting of muscles, so our muscles start to get weak, suppression of the immune system, like we already talked about. You can get ulcers in the GI tract, failure of the beta cells in the pancreas to release insulin. So really, really detrimental to our health. So obviously stress has a relationship to our health and human disease. Although the exact role of stress in human disease is not known, it's clear that it can lead to particular diseases by inhibiting, at least temporarily, certain components of our immune system. Examples of stress-related disorders include gastritis, which would be pain and inflammation in the stomach, ulcerative colitis, so colon ulcers, irritable bowel syndrome, hypertension, fancy word for high blood pressure, asthma, rheumatoid arthritis, migraines, anxiety, and depression. Our final slide here just shows the first two of the three stress response stages, the fight or flight response, that immediate response, and all the things that we talked about previously that go into it, involving the hypothalamus activating the sympathetic nervous system. The second and much longer stage involves the releasing hormones from the hypothalamus, triggering the release of certain hormones from the anterior pituitary, ultimately causing the release of cortisol from the adrenal cortex, growth hormone from the liver, and thus IGFs, insulin-like growth factors from the liver, and then T3 and T4 from the thyroid, and all those things that take place as a result. So, okay, that wraps us up. So I will turn her off.